From what we hear in the news, it seems that science has proven the Earth to be billions of years old. But yet creation scientists say that it's only thousands of years old. But how do we know which one is correct? What does science really say? Stay tuned.
If the average scientist became aware of a few of the facts in favor of a young world, pretty soon the myth would collapse.
This is Science, Scripture, and Salvation, a creation radio journal. I'm Chris O'Brien for the Institute for Creation Research. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Science, Scripture, and Salvation. This is the third in an 8-part series that we've entitled The Myths of Evolution and the Media. Nowadays, it's very common to believe that the Earth is billions of years old. That's what's said on TV, in the movies, and textbooks, and even by most scientists. However, there is excellent scientific evidence to the contrary. Stay tuned as we talk about the myth that the Earth is billions of years old. First, where does this idea that the Earth is very old come from? Well, this recent trend can be traced back to the early 1800s. Dr. John Morris is a geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research.
Back in the early 1800s, when Charles Lyell was promoting his view of uniformitarianism, that only slow and gradual processes have shaped and structured the Earth, he ran into great opposition from the scientists of the day because they saw evidence that the world had been reshaped by the flood of Noah's day. Well, Lyell, after he published his book, Principles of Geology, in 1830, he scoured the world looking for geologic evidence that could support this old Earth view.
One place that he went was Niagara Falls in New York.
Well, that waterfall began to carve back a canyon, and now it's the Niagara Gorge. Here. But Lyell says, oh no, it goes much slower than that. Even though the observation was 5 feet per year, he reported it as 1 foot per year. Now the whole canyon itself is only about 35,000 feet long, and so he said, well, this whole canyon must have taken 35,000 years to carve.
But Charles Lyell had the wrong rate.
Well, if you put in the 5 feet per year, it comes right back to an idea that's very compatible with the recent flood of Noah's day. But you see how a misrepresentation of the truth led to the perpetuation of the myth that things are older than they really are.
So Lyell came to the wrong conclusion about the rate of erosion at Niagara Falls. But since that time, many scientists have proven the Earth to be billions of years old, right? Well, much of what we hear claims this to be true. Dr. Russ Humphreys is a physicist with Sandia National Laboratories.
Well, since, first of all, it's a minority of data that is like that, one should go with the flow of the majority of the data and look for alternative explanations of this, say, 10% of the data that is like that.
We're going to spend the next few moments looking at some of these evidences. Dr. Andrew Snelling is a geologist with the Institute for Creation Research.
We could look at comets. Now, these comets are believed to have started the same time as the Earth was revolving in space. And we've noticed that they aren't as bright the second time and the third time and the fourth time they come around. That's because they're disintegrating. And so really we've only got about 7 to 10,000 years worth of these short period comets around. Otherwise they'd all be disintegrated by now if the Earth was millions and billions of years old.
To solve this problem, evolutionists have theorized that there must be a new supply of comets in the solar system. However, they haven't found any solid confirmation for these ideas. Another evidence for a young Earth comes from the bottom of the ocean. Dr. Humphreys.
Each year, water and winds erode about 25 billion tons of dirt and rock from the continents, and they dump it in the ocean. And this material just stays as mud on the hard rock of the ocean floor. Now, the average depth of the mud in the whole ocean, including the continental shelves at the edge, if you spread that out smoothly over the whole ocean, that average depth would be less than 400 meters. Now, the evolutionists only can think of one main way to remove much mud from the ocean floor, and that is by plate tectonic subduction. Now, according to secular scientific literature, that process presently removes only about 1 billion tons per year. Now, as far as anyone knows, the other 24 billion tons per year simply accumulate.
And this creates a problem for the idea that the Earth is really billions of years old.
Now, at that rate, erosion would deposit the present amount of sediment in less than 12 million years. Now, this process is supposed to have been going on for 3 billion years. So there's a factor of 250 error there. And anytime you're a factor of 250 off, there's something wrong.
The fact that there should be more material on the sea floor indicates that the Earth is young. However, there is another piece of evidence that is very similar. Dr. Morris.
We can measure how much salt is in the ocean today. We know how big the ocean is. We know its average salt content. We know how much salt is in the ocean. And by measuring rivers and other processes, we know how fast salt is being added to the ocean on a daily basis. But if the oceans were even hundreds of millions of years old, they would be so choked with salt that life would be impossible.
Another young Earth indicator is the Earth's magnetic field. Dr. Snelling.
Everyone knows that the Earth has a magnetic field because we use it when we take a compass. And that magnetic field, in fact, has been measured over the last 150, 160 years, some 30-odd measurements. And it indicates that the strength of that field is decreasing with time. And it doesn't take too much calculation to realise that if you go back 7,000 years, for example, the Earth's magnetic field will be so strong that it'll be getting as strong as the pulse from a magnetic star. So that limits the age of the Earth because everyone agrees that the magnetic field formed at the same time as the Earth. So that puts limits.
And there are fossils found inside of rock that also present interesting questions.
When you see a fossil of one fish in the process of eating another, that sort of snap frozen in time, not thousands and millions of years, instantaneous burial. A marine reptile, like a fish, fossilised in the process of giving birth to a little baby. Instantaneous fossilization.
Dr. Morris.
When you think about it, the only way we can really know about the unobserved past is to go back to human observation, human records. Now, how far back do records go? Well, it's a well-known fact that human written historical records go back just a few thousand years and stop. They come to an absolute dead end and go no farther.
At the beginning of our program, Dr. Humphreys mentioned that most of the data supports the idea that the Earth is young. As a matter of fact, he would claim that there's only 10% of all evidence that's being interpreted for an old Earth. So what is this old Earth data? One of the best known is radioisotope dating. And now, a team of scientists has come together as a task force to scientifically document the problems with radioisotope dating. The name of this team is RATE. That's an acronym for radioisotopes and the age of the Earth. Their goal is to provide an answer to the evolutionary claim that the Earth is billions of years old. Dr. Humphreys.
There is strong evidence that radioactive decay was much faster in the recent past. And one item of evidence along that line is the accumulation of radioactively generated helium in small crystals in the rock beneath our feet. And this helium has stayed around much too long in these crystals if the world was billions of years old. It can only last in those crystals for about 1,000 or several thousand years, let's say. And yet the helium itself is evidence of billions of years worth of decay. So we have this conundrum. We have billions of years worth of nuclear decay occurring within thousands of years ago.
But in order for that to make sense, there must have been something that changed the rate of decay.
So that means sometime in the past there had to be an acceleration of nuclear decay. And we think that one time that happened was probably during the Genesis flood. Various lines of evidence lead to that. So we're working on that hypothesis, and there is evidence, solid evidence, that points to that. And if that acceleration of nuclear decay did occur in the past, then it shrinks the radioactive timescales from millions of years down to months.
So far, we've learned that most of the scientific evidence actually supports the idea of a young Earth. Only a small amount is being understood to say the opposite, and even that information is being reinterpreted. Therefore, many scientists may see evidence for a young Earth in their specialty, but they think that all of the data from the other scientific disciplines has already proven an old Earth.
All the disciplines have much more evidence that the world is young than that it is old, but the average scientist doesn't realize the significance of it. He just thinks he's not interpreting the evidence the right way and that the experts in the other fields are correct. So it's much more than just a few fields giving evidence for an old world. There's much more evidence for a young world.
And so, the myth that the Earth is billions of years old continues, and the media helps to perpetuate this myth. How does it do this? Well, many are not familiar with the system used by the media.
The scientist will often hold a press conference about his article, backed up by this release in the technical journal, and various reporters will come and get that information, and then they'll publish it in, first of all, the science news, some of the popular science journals, Scientific American, things like that, and then some of the more prestigious newspapers will get that information, like New York Times, Washington Post. Then the other newspapers imitate the leading newspapers and publish the same thing. So there's this pecking order, the hierarchy, and it's controlled, its input is controlled at the top by these evolutionists who control the top secular scientific journals.
Why is this issue important to Christians anyway? According to Dr. Morris,
if things have been here for millions of years, living and dying and going extinct, and if the dinosaurs lived and went extinct 65 million years before even man got here, then death and extinction and pain and suffering and carnivorous activity and parasites and cancer, all of this stuff has been here before man. If the old earth is right, then this kind of death was here before man sinned, and so God is the author of this kind of death. And if that kind of death predated man's sin, then it couldn't be the penalty for man's sin because it was here before sin. And if death is not the penalty for sin, then what in the world good did the death of Jesus Christ accomplish? You see, this issue of the age of the earth goes right to the core of Christian thinking and Christian doctrine and the heart of the gospel. You see, if the old earth is true, then Christianity is not true. They cannot both be true. They are mutually exclusive.
Dr. Humphreys.
So the result of all of this is that the picture of a young earth that we get simply by taking Scripture straightforwardly on the matter and by taking account of all the science that we know on the matter, that picture is a very hopeful picture. It says we have a caring God who made a perfect universe to begin with. Then he cared enough about us to deal with our sin and provide a way out by Jesus the Christ that he provided. And so this picture of a young world is very hopeful, and it's an optimistic picture, and it provides a universe ruled by a good God who cares about us, and he has provided a way out from our sin.
This has been the third in an 8-part series called The Myths of Evolution and the Media. Join us next time. We'll talk about the myth that simple things become more complex by random chance. Today we mentioned 12 evidences that the Earth is young. If you'd like a summary of these, please ask for Evidence of a Young World when you get in touch with ICR. To ask for today's free offer, please call toll-free 1-800-7-GENESIS. That's 1-800, the number 7 and the word Genesis. 1-800-7-GENESIS. And you can address your letters to ICR at P.O. Box 2667, El Cajon, California, 92021. ICR's website address is www.icr.org. Science, Scripture, and Salvation, a Creation Radio Journal, is a production of ICR. I am Chris O'Brien for the Institute for Creation Research.